Hey everybody, it's Dak here from the Ed Boys, and welcome to another episode of the Wolf of the Grain Exchange. At the end of last episode, we ended up with 25 mil, which is actually a quarter of the way of 100 mil, if you couldn't tell, and that's our goal. So far, I think it's been going very well. It's clearly getting a little bit faster as we make more money. I don't think that comes as a surprise to anybody, but it is working that way, so that is good. Being at 25 mil compared to 15 mil, which is where we started the last episode, clearly having that 10 extra mil, there are a few items that I can now afford that I couldn't before, but there's really not that many items that I can afford like multiple of now, and I can actually do some legitimate flipping with. Even though I could afford an item that was 20 mil or 22 mil, I think some, what are they called? The Bandos Tacits. I think those would fall in that category. It's not horrible. I could still flip one at a time, but I personally, at the moment, feel it would be better to be flipping some of these items that are still from like 1 to 5 mil and flipping a lot of them. So really what's going on here is I've gotten to a point where I can now just flip a few more of those items at a time. So beforehand with 15 mil, I could only buy like 5 or 6 whips, and that was my whole stack. Now I could be buying 5 or 6 whips, and as you can see, I can buy a handful of infinity boots. I've also done whips and dragon chains at the same time. That seems to be working pretty well. Overall, clearly having more money has been extremely helpful, but unfortunately for the excitement of watching, this episode is going to have a lot of repeated items from last episode. Still sticking with that 1 to 5 mil range generally. I do try a few more items later on that you will see. But generally, there's like 5 or 6 items that seem to be the strongest ones. Not the only ones that I'm making money off of by any means. These items have included the Abyssal Whip and Infinity Boots, Dragon Chain, Berserker Ring, Dark Bow, Amulet of Fury. Those are probably the most solid 6 at the moment. But things like the Bandos God Sword and the Zamrock God Sword, those, it seems like only one of them works very well at a single time. Like, I'll test both prices, and the Zamrock God Sword one time will have a like 30 to 40k margin, while the Bandos has a 5k margin, and then it'll flip-flop the next time I try to do it. But either way, it seems like those 2 items I generally make some good profit on. I can always count on the Robin Hood hat to make me a little bit of money. I haven't really gotten anything huge off of it yet, but occasionally I can manage a 20 to 30k profit margin for at least a couple of them. So far, I've had maybe like 3 or 4 times where I've made 5, 6, or even 700k in an hour, but it really isn't commonly like that. I'm usually more around 3 to 350k an hour. It's not necessarily my average, because I don't very often get like less than 200, but in general, I can usually expect 350 to 400k in an hour if I really sit down and I have some fresh items to work with. Like if I'm running out of items, I got a bunch of 4-hour buy limits reached, then of course I start to have a little bit of trouble, and it can slow down at that point if I'm not thinking of enough items. But in general, I feel like I have a list of items that's large enough that it can get me through 4 hours the majority of the time. Sometimes it's a little bit quicker and I have to start thinking of some new stuff that I haven't tried yet. Sometimes it's a little bit slower, and it turns out I can't flip the items at the back of the list if I want to restart at the front. Now, there's obviously some items that are working better than others. That's why I listed off a few that I was saying seem to always work solidly. But there are times where it can be kind of random. It really depends on how the market is moving at that second, and you can definitely predict it. But for me, it's really more like I just try a very broad variety of items, and 2 or 3 of them, maybe 4 or 5, will turn out to be a really good profit margin, and the other ones turn out to be a so-so, maybe not very good. I've lost money just price checking some of them. It has happened. It's definitely a higher risk once we get up to these more expensive items, because sometimes it'll say that there's a 60 or 70k margin when I go buy and sell one, and then I have a hard time flipping it for even like a 20k margin, so that item ends up being a bust. And that could be the same item that was really successful the day before, getting me a 40 to 50k profit margin for every one of them that I bought in the 4-hour limit. So what I'm really getting to at this point, I guess, is I just gotta keep going through all the items I know have worked before, and maybe even ones that I think can work, and it just seems to add up to, as I was saying, about 350 to 400k an hour at this point. Now, this is a spot in the video where I tried some new items. I worked with Odium Wards that actually worked very well. I was able to get 40 to 50k profit margin, and I think I sold like 5 or 6 of them like that. Pretty solid. I didn't get a chance to try the Malediction Ward, though I would like to go ahead and try that one, because if the Odium Ward works, I'm assuming the Malediction Ward would too. And Trident of the Sea is another dark bow or infinity boots level item, really close to 1 mil, so I can buy a lot of them. Generally, I can buy the whole 4-hour limit at once, which I believe is 8. That's my current assumption. And it doesn't take a huge chunk of my cash stack, so I can manage to flip other items at the same time. The uncut onyx and the cut onyx, not a lot of people seem to buy those, so they don't work generally as well, but I have made some profit from them, so it's not like they don't work at all. If you're making profit, then clearly something's going right. But it's not something I would spend my entire stack on to try to flip some, because you're probably wasting your time. You want to spend a little bit of money on those and maybe flip some other items. This was the biggest item I had tried so far, was the Guthan set. They're about 10 mil a piece, so I could currently afford almost 3 of them. Once I get this uncut onyx to sell, I'm above 30 mil, so I was able to afford 3 of them. And it turned out to flip pretty well. Made about 40k on each, I believe, and sold 4 or 5 of them. That's fairly solid. 200k. If I could do that in half an hour, then I'm getting the amount of money per hour that I'm looking for, around 400k. Other items at this level would be like the Ranger's Tunic. 10 mil items. The Bando's chest plate, I believe, is more like 13 or 14 mil, but we're getting to that point where I could be flipping that, and I will be trying that very soon. Otherwise, some of the more expensive items, they worked well. I really haven't gotten to a point where I can flip them that well. I was only able to flip like 3 Guthan sets at a time, or 3 Ranger's Tunics at a time, where I'd like to be able to flip the entire 4-hour buy limit at once. Of course, that would mean getting up to like a 70 or 80 mil stack, but eventually we'll be at that point, and that's when we'll be making more money per hour, preferably. The big thing though with this episode, I really just got to a point where I could flip more of every item at the lower end, clearly not at the expensive end like we were just saying we'd like to get to. So being able to flip like 10 whips at a time, and then 5 dragon chains, or the other way around, maybe a whole thing of dark bows, being able to get all 7 berserker rings or furies in a single flip is pretty good. I say 7 even though the buy limit is 8, because if I buy one to check the price, that means I can only sell 7. So if you ever hear me say like 1 under the buy limit for how much I'm trading, that's because I like to check the prices by buying and selling one, especially when OS Buddy is playing around like it has been lately. The prices, it's basically crashed. It's not been helping at all. So that's how I've been having to do it, is buy one and sell one, and it seems to work. It's a little risky. Like I've said, I have bought and sold trying to check a margin, and it gave me a killer margin, then I never made the money back. But obviously that has not happened as often as I've made the money, because our cash stack is growing. If there's one main point I guess I could say from this money range that we're working with here, it's almost the most repetitive part that we've had. I've just been flipping the same items for a few days now, and it's been working clearly. I haven't had to spend nearly as much time per day to make the percentage of money, the percentage of the stack we're going for, that I usually want to do. So clearly everything's growing. It's all good. I'm very happy about that, but starting to get a little repetitive. It's not as exciting. I've probably flipped a few hundred whips at this point, and it's a little boring after a while, but the cash stack is growing. It's very solid. I'm very happy about that, so I really shouldn't complain, even though it's boring. If it's making money, oh well. Eventually we'll get to a point where I'll be flipping some much more expensive, much more exciting items. When I first got to these items, I was very excited, so I'm really just looking forward to getting up to 50, 60, 70 mil stack, where we can actually start playing with some things that maybe have a few 100k margin. Even some of the items we're working with now, honestly, like a Guthan set, can get up to that point. But if I can start flipping items like Ceridome and God's Sword, for instance, that could get a few 100k margin. Just flipping 3 of those, if it takes you an hour, that's over $1 million an hour, which is more money than I have made in a single hour in this entire series. We're almost getting to a point where we're wrapping up the episode, guys. This is our last stretch of items that I flipped to get to the amount of money that I wanted to get to. We just have these 2 more Berserker rings to sell, and that actually wraps up all of the items that we're selling on this episode. With these 2 Berserker rings, we actually get up to a 35 mil stack, so we made 10 mil in this episode. Pretty solid. I'm definitely happy where the cash stack is right now and where it's going. It's getting a lot quicker, and that's just good news. Let's be honest. The big thing I want to get out of this is to be good enough at flipping and have enough money to be good enough at flipping to actually make some solid profit. And I believe we're almost to that point. Anyways, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this one. I know that I enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Thank you everyone for watching today's video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to click on that like button and tell us what you enjoyed about it. If you're looking for some more RuneScape videos like this one, then be sure to join the cul-de-sac by subscribing for more. We will see you next time.